What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadski, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video. And in today's video, we're going to be having a look at the Luffy and Lucci anniversary exclusive characters. So in yesterday's video, we utilized Zoro and Kaku as our friend captain in a little bit of a miniature showcase, and we're doing the exact same thing here, except with Luffy and Lucci, of course. Now, this character I think is a little bit more difficult to showcase as a friend captain because, unfortunately, you actually cannot get access to the captain shift mechanic as a friend captain, which I think is a little bit of a missed opportunity. Now, I don't really understand how they could potentially give captain shift as a friend captain, but the fact is at least on paper, the way that I read the character, you cannot get access to their EX super unless if you activate the captain shift mechanic, which I think is really bad. I didn't actually 100% test this, but according to the text in the game, it says this character needs to become Luffy and Lucci during captain shift and have 3 of the listed characters on the crew. Which, not being able to access that EX super actually is a pretty big deal because their EX super is quite good. I guess we'll start with that. We're not really going to talk about it too much, but you do get a full board of tandem slots. They give themselves a tandem slot through Super Block, which is quite good. And then they also give you the 2.25 times conditional boost against delayed and paralyzed enemies for 1 turn. And then also can choose to completely remove your captain switch effect, as well as getting super dex and super quick. So this makes sense because when the character performs captain shift, it lasts for 10 turns. So sometimes you don't want it to last for 10 turns. So being able to, get access to that and remove that is quite good. And being able to give you the delayed and paralysis conditional boost makes sense. However, they don't actually provide any part in their kit to delay or paralyze the enemy, which is a really big missed opportunity. I really hate the fact that they are built that way. Kind of really hurts them overall, in my opinion. But, that's just the EX super part of the mechanic. This character has a lot more to them than just the EX super. So I guess we'll start with that captain effect and kind of break it down what's going on. So Luffy and Lucci have similar captain abilities with some very minor differences. The big thing is that if you are going to be using them in content, they do give you -2 turns of cooldown, which is quite nice, allowing you to speed farm content, kind of, a little bit, which is kind of good. They also give 1.3 times health, and then up to a 5 times attack boost, or 5 times is the floor that you can get. And the health and attack boost is for fighter, shooter, slasher, and free spirit. So they boost a lot of good characters. You're going to have a pretty good pool of characters to play around with if you do opt to use them as a captain. The utility component of their captain as well, as they give you 10 turns of special reverse, so that's really cool. Being able to resist 10 turns of that is a phenomenal ability to have. But they actually do give you up to a maximum of 5.5 times attack in their solo captains. Luffy needs to be above 70% HP, and then Lucci needs to be below 30% HP, which is kind of weird that they have really weird HP mechanics in regards to getting that major attack boost in their captain ability. And then the interesting component for these guys, and the main reason, or one of the reasons why you would opt to use him as a captain, is when you perform a barrier pierce with them as a captain, they will allow you to remove 1 turn of enemy abilities. So depending on who you have as the captain, you can get different effects. So if Luffy's the captain and you hit a perfect with barrier pierce activation, it will remove 1 turn of defense and 1 turn of enemy barriers. And then if you have Lucci as the captain, it removes 1 turn of defense up, and then 1 turn of enemy resilience. So that's kind of neat that they have the ability to do that. I will admit though, removing 1 turn of enemy resilience is pretty redundant in a lot of cases. So the captain ability, while it has some interesting components, it's really not my favorite, and I don't know if I'd go out of my way to use this guy as a captain. I mean, unless if you have it as your own unit, which you can perform captain shift to switch this character out of the captain position. Of course, if you know you're going to be dealt with special reverse, you can have him as your captain, and then once the special reverse is dealt with, you can switch them out of the captain position and you're good to go. Another thing though to keep in mind is their special ability is dependent, or they perform different abilities depending on what type and what class your captain is. And because of the way that this character is kind of designed, this character will basically fulfill all of the requirements for their special. So, that is very, very important as well. You want to keep that in mind that, if you are going to be not using them as a captain, but you want them on your crew, you need to be fulfilling that ability for their special ability, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But when you do end up combining them, they do also give you up to a 6 times attack boost if you're either above 70% or below 30% HP. So that's kind of interesting. If you're in like that middle threshold, it can really kind of suck, only getting a max of 5.5, but getting up to 6 times is quite good. There are lots of ways to manipulate HP with lots of healing abilities or health cutting mechanics, so I don't think that's going to be a major issue when you're, specifically using them in like high damage content, for example, which I do feel is where this guy will shine the most, is in that high damage content that we talk about with like super boss Kizunas, for example. And then of course in their combined captain ability, they will also have the effect to remove 1 turn of defense, 1 turn of resilience, and 1 turn of barrier if you perform barrier pierce. And that can be one of the really annoying things, is if you are trying to utilize that mechanic to the fullest. A lot of characters that have come out recently that have barrier pierce usually have really strict health requirements in terms of how they get performed. So again, just another thing you have to take into consideration when building with this guy, which can be a little bit of a problem, right? So you just have to be very careful when you're building with them. You have to make sure that your team is spot on before you actually like jump into content, because if you're not planning your team out correctly, your abilities are just not going to activate, and then you're kind of screwed, right? But overall, captain ability is perfectly fine. So that's the way that I see it right now. So I guess with all that in mind, let's go ahead and move on to their special ability. So their special, in my opinion, is like the highlight, the major highlight of this character, because it's just extremely unique, and there just aren't a lot of characters that can straight up do what this character does. So first of which, it does give you a bit of damage, which is never a bad thing. And then it also removes 7 turns of special bind, and we'll get to it a little bit later, but their switch ability does enable them to remove their own special bind. So that's quite good. So being able to remove up to 7 turns of special bind is a really powerful effect in their special ability, which is, just straight up just good for utility, but also very good for high damage content, where sometimes you need, the high damage, but also you do need to get around some gimmicks sometimes. So being able to have a little bit of utility is quite good. And then getting into the meat and potatoes of their special, where it's really dependent on the color and the classes of your captain. So for the first component of their special, you need to have a Dex or Quick captain that is also either fighter or slasher. So of course, if you have this character as your captain, that's not going to be a problem, but it needs to be Dex or Quick, as well as being either fighter or slasher. If you are able to fulfill that, then you get double stacking conditional boosts for 1 turn. So obviously a very powerful ability to get access to. Remember that in this character's EX Super, they do give you the delayed and paralysis conditional boost. Of course, they don't give you the condition for the conditional boost, but it's still cool that they are able to give that to you. Now, the other part of their special, which is the part that I like the most, where you need to have either a Dex or a Quick captain, but instead of being a fighter or a slasher captain, it needs to be shooter or free spirit. So I feel like that's pretty easy to fulfill in a lot of cases. And if you're able to do that, having a Dex or Quick unit that is also either shooter or free spirit, then you get a 1 turn, 1.75 times set target status. For those who don't remember what set target status does, it is a mechanic that came out with Cross Guild last year. And this ability is very strong because it goes through like all types of immunity. You don't need to worry about it. It's always going to be inflicted. And it literally will just straight up multiply your damage by 1.75 times. It's just a free bonus damage that stacks on top of weakness debuff, on top of increased damage taken, on top of everything. It's just free 1.75 times damage that the enemy cannot deal with. Very powerful ability. On top of that is when you kill an enemy with set target status, it reduces the character's cooldown by 2 turns based on which character they killed it. So hypothetically, on this team composition that you're seeing here, if the Rayleigh character ended up killing the enemy, he would get like -2 turns of cooldown, right? So it's pretty cool either way. In a lot of cases, the set target status is going to be used for, the big burst turns against bosses. Usually it's not going to matter about the cooldown reduction stuff. But, sometimes you may want to have like double Lucci and Kaku, use one special early on, use one a little bit later on, and then that can help you, potentially get some speed ups for certain characters' cooldowns. And that's basically all they do. They do combine into their dual unit for 3 turns, obviously, like most other dual units in the game. But when you really boil it down, the character doesn't do that much with their special, but what they do have is quite powerful. Double stacking conditional boost, set target status, special bind removal, and it's a damage dealing special as well. So it's a good special, and it definitely feels like an anniversary level, almost a Super Sugo-Fest level worthy kit overall. but the character is very difficult to use because of the conditions that are required to be fulfilled to get the most out of them. And as we talked about extensively throughout the video, they don't provide the condition for their conditional boost, so the fact that they give you double stacking conditional boost is a bit of a weird conundrum when you're team building, because you need to have another character on your crew that can paralyze the enemy or delay them, which can make team building a little tricky, honestly. So that's the way that I felt whilst using this guy, is that in a lot of cases, I don't care about the double stacking conditional boost, I just care about the set target status, and that's basically all I'm using him for. So before we wrap up this video, I want to go ahead and talk about the switchability of this character. Of course, it's a dual unit, so, you know, the switchability is kind of important. So the base switch effect that you get, it does remove their own special bind by 7 turns, which is important because their special ability also removes the whole crew's special bind by 7 turns, so it makes sense. They also will change adjacent slots into tandem, which is decent. It doesn't go through block slots, unfortunately, but still, you know, pretty cool that they do that. And then also will boost your crew's base attack by 500 for 1 turn. That can be overwritten. That's a pretty bad ability overall, but the special bind removal, the slot change is pretty good. And remember, that is their base switch ability. When you activate the captain shift mechanic, you'll get the ability to switch from Luffy into Lucci, which then you become the crewmate, or you go from Lucci into Luffy, and then you become the captain. And in order for this to take place, you need to have Luffy as the captain position, or you have Rob Lucci as the middle right position. So in this clip that you're seeing right now, the position that Zoro and Sanji are in is where Lucci would have to be when he performs his swap to become the captain for 10 turns. The additional effect that you get upon performing the captain shift is that your critical hit rate is increased by 30% for 2 turns, which it's actually for 3 turns. And that ability is very, like, whatever. It's meant to help you with your Kaku and Zoro captain ability, who wants you to get guaranteed crits so that you can remove defensive effects that way. But as I said, in most cases, the critical hit rate is just overall pretty bad, and again, just a pretty redundant ability overall. Do keep in mind though that when you do perform captain shift, you actually do get both switches to activate. So you get the base switch and the captain switch ability activate. So you get the special bind removal, the tandem slots, the base attack, as well as the ability to captain shift and then change your captains around, get the super switch reduction, you get the critical hit rate and stuff. So overall, I have felt this character to be just fine. Now look, this is just performing them as a friend captain. If we end up owning this unit eventually, I think it's going to definitely give me a bit more of a different perspective in terms of how this character will be used. But I think overall, from the brief time that I've had my hands on these units, I would say that I actually do like Zoro and Kaku a lot more. Mainly just because Zoro and Kaku, you can chuck them in any team, and they're going to work pretty well with giving you a pretty decent amount of utility, as well as giving you decent damage output. Whereas Zoro and Rob Lucci, you know, you need a lot to make them work. But I do feel like when you make the team proper, Luffy and Lucci are going to be pretty incredible. When you have your conditional boost popper and you have your set target status, you shift captains around so you can get multiple EX supers or super type abilities to activate. Potentially having great synergy with the New Year's Luffy as well as a friend captain potentially. Like, you could get some really nice stuff happening with this unit. But let me know your thoughts and opinions about Rob Lucci and Monkey D. Luffy down below in the comment section. Really hope you guys enjoyed this one, and if you did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Other than that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.